Hello, my name is Patrick Allen, and I'm an interviewer for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. The program in Southwest Ohio is conducted through the Cincinnati-Hamilton County Public Library. That's under the direction of Brian Powers. Today is April the 6th, 2025. My camera person is my wife, Mary, and we are pleased to be able to interview Robert Joseph Wilhelm, and we're at his home at 10,045 Ball Road, Byesville, Byesville, Ohio. And before we started, Robert told me they call him Bob. So Bob, thank you for doing this interview. Before we start on your military service, let's talk about you and your family. When and where were you born?
I was born in Indianapolis. My dad worked for the railroad, and although he and my mother were both Ohioans, he got transferred to Indianapolis, and I was born there.
And what was your birth date?
December 3rd, 1930.
All right. And where were you born? Were you born at home or in the hospital?
No, I was born in a hospital in Indianapolis. So.
All right. Well, what is your father's name?
His name was Joseph.
Joseph E?
Joseph E. It was Edison. Was his middle
And your
name.
mother?
Her name was Helen B. and her middle name was Beatrice.
And what was her maiden name?
Yahraus. Yahraus. So we're both good German heritage.
It sounded like it. Do you know how your mom and dad met each other?
You know, I did do some genealogy work prior to his passing. I wish I had started it sooner when she was still alive, but she was born, and they were both born and raised in Chillicothe, Ohio. She came from a relatively large family, and her father died when the kids were young, and she went to live with her aunt and uncle, who had no children, in California. And they happened to live in Los Angeles, and he was a barber, and he had a barber shop that was just one block away from Hollywood and Vine. And she spent all of her teen years, went to high school at Hollywood High School and graduated. And as soon as she graduated, she came back to Chillicothe, Ohio, and that's when she met my dad. And they went together for a year or so, and then they got married. So he was born in 1900, so his birthday was easy to remember. As old as the years, I always said. So, and he, so they got married. They have a lot of stories of things. I really enjoy watching some of the current TV shows. 1923 is one of them, which if it's just 7 years prior to when I was born. And of course, my dad, the stories that he told me, he was 23 years old when that movie started.
Okay.
And yet all you see on there is horse and buggies and very few cars and all the things that I don't remember a lot about, but it appeared to be a very interesting time to be raising a family at that time. So
your dad was born in 1900. When was your mom born? When was
she was about 6 years younger. So she was born in 1906. So, but they were both born in Chillicothe. So,
well, after they got married, where did they live?
They lived in Chillicothe for quite a while. In fact, the railroad, he worked for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and he got a job with them early on in his life, and he stayed with them. They didn't move around a lot. When they went to when they moved to Indiana, like I say, that's where I was born. And they moved from Indiana back to Dayton, Ohio when I was 12 years old. So, and we stayed in Dayton, Ohio from 1940s until I moved here to Cambridge in 1970. So I moved around in Dayton, from Dayton to Beaver Creek and things, but he spent most of his career there in Dayton. But
So what did he do for the B&O? What was his job? Do you remember?
well,
Was he an engineer? Or
no, he actually he had an office job, but when the job that I remember the most that he was the guy that whenever there was a train wreck, he had to go out and make arrangements for whatever materials was involved to get rid of it, to do whatever they had to do with it, clean up the mess,
Salvage or dispose.
and salvage or dispose of it. And he had some very interesting things that he had to get rid of over his lifetime as far as doing that. So,
is there anything that stands out in your mind that he had to dispose of?
oh, you know, he would bring home a few small items sometimes, but it was nothing for. He would have box cars full of sugar and canned goods and plywood. I can remember getting several sheets of plywood one time to do some work. Coal was a big thing, of course, when they would wreck and they would have coal, and he would sell coal in buckets to people that were heating and with it. And he actually, it was quite interesting because he had to go around and find things. I remember one time he had a train wrecked and it had tank cars full of molasses, and the tank cars were leaking and molasses was going everywhere. And he contacted one of the fellows that went around and cleaned out septic tanks, and they brought their trucks in and they loaded them up with this molasses and sold them to farmers to feed their hogs. So he got into a lot of strange things when he was doing that.
Very interesting.
But he worked for them for a long time.
But he was here in Chillicothe with B&O, then they moved him to Indianapolis.
Right, and then back to Dayton.
And that's where you were born.
That's where I was born.
Were you their first child?
Yes, I was. I had a younger brother. He was 5 years younger than I was.
What was his name?
His name was John Lee. I don't remember a whole lot about John Lee, but John Lee was killed in an auto accident, and when I was 12, he was 7 years old. So I don't even recall what we were doing or how it occurred or whatever. But
were you in the same accident?
No, I was not. So,
okay.
And then my mom had a younger, she had a baby that only lived a couple of weeks. His name was Albert.
Albert?
Albert, and that was her uncle's name, and she named him after him. But he had a heart issue when he was born, and he only lived for a couple of weeks. They are both buried with my parents down in Chillicothe in Green Lawn Cemetery. So.
All right.
So that was the extent of our family. So I'm kind of like an only child, but I really did have two brothers
right.
as I was growing up. So
you have my sympathy on that.
Yeah.
So do you have a particular religion that your family followed?
I tell you, when I was in, my parents didn't go to church that regular. But when I was in school, in high school, several of us got together and we started attending different churches, and we would go just to see what they were like, and we did that all throughout high school. I ended up in a Presbyterian church,
okay,
and that's kind of what I've been in all my life. When I moved here, I always belonged to the Presbyterian Church in Dayton, and then when we moved here in Cambridge, we were also involved with the Presbyterian Church and still are today. So,
well, What grade school did you attend?
Well, I actually went to several. I went to a grade school, of course, in Indianapolis, and I don't tell you very honestly, I don't remember much about that.
All right.
Or the one that I went to in Dayton, for that matter. But
How about high school? Where were you?
high school, I went to Dayton Stivers, and I'm still a member of their. They have a alumni, quite an active alumni club. The school itself is now a art high school, and but at one time there were only two schools in Dayton, Stivers and Steele, and there was quite a rivalry between the two of them.
Right.
But, Stivers had a lot of different sports activities that they were involved in, and I enjoyed playing football. I did that and played track when I was in high school, but never that good at it, but I enjoyed it.
Well, what position did you play in football?
In football, I was a guard. I wasn't that heavy. When I look back at it now, I don't know why I ended up at that position, but I played guard, and in track I ran the quarter mile, which today I couldn't walk the quarter mile, but then I used to run it. So
I used to like track as well as basketball.
yeah.
So when did you work while you were going to high school?
You know, my main jobs, I remember working, I had a paper route where I was delivering the paper. I remember we actually, that was my first experience with labor issues. We went on strike for more money to deliver the paper. I think we were trying to get another penny or something per paper. We didn't get it, and I ended up quitting and getting mad because in Dayton I had a paper route that I can recall that had a lot of houses, and they wouldn't allow you to cross their lawn. So I had to run, go down to the street, up to the next, and I was up and back, and it was it wasn't that long of a course to have to do that, other than the fact that the way I had to go and stay off of the grass. So what I ended up with mainly was I started working at a swimming pool, and I went through every job they had, to where I was started out with taking people's, being the one that took care of when they came in, making sure they had a place for their clothes and things of that type. Ended up cleaning the pool. I worked in the pool restaurant that they had, and finally ended up as a lifeguard and ended up as a head guard. So I spent most of my younger days around that swimming pool with various jobs.
Well, let's talk about your paper route. What did you deliver in the morning or at night?
It was generally it was in an evening paper.
The Dayton Daily News?
Yes.
Okay. And they also had the Journal Herald at that time, but
yes, they did.
That was the morning paper.
Yeah.
Do you have any recollection about how many customers were on your route?
I don't recall that. I remember. I just remember I had a lot of issues with not getting paid for some of the deliveries, and there seemed to be a lot of issues with the paper delivery, and
Where was your
I wasn't
route? What
that
part of
happy
town?
with it.
What part of town was your route in?
Well, I'm trying to think of the area mainly where it was. There was a lot of funeral homes and businesses that were on my route. And that's why it was the houses were rather large houses, and there was a lot of up and down as far as getting in between the houses to deliver them. But it was down around in the Brown Avenue area of Dayton.
Brown Street?
Yeah,
Okay.
We lived right off of Wyoming Street.
Okay, so that'd been the southeast part of town.
Right.
Yeah. So you went from delivering newspapers to working at the pool.
Working at the pool.
What pool did you work
It was the Dayton Oakwood pool. I don't recall. It was on Irving Avenue. I can't even remember the exact name of it, but I enjoyed that. Like I say, I became a lifeguard, and we cleaned the pool. Well, we had diving equipment. We had to wear the air mask and things and go down and clean the pool on a daily basis. So we would be submerged sometimes for an hour, and an air compressor that was pumping air into us. So it was kind of an interesting thing. So when I finally graduated from high school, I started by going to work with the railroad, I guess, thinking I was going to follow in my dad's footsteps. And I had a job with them that I worked at for about 6 months. It was a kind of an office job, and decided at that time that that wasn't really something I was interested in, and I ended up deciding I wanted to go do something else, so I went to work for NCR at that time. So,
all right.
And I
So
started an apprenticeship.
what was your graduation date? Was that
In
about
1948.
1948?
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, and you would have been 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember where you were when that happened?
I was in Indianapolis, but I don't recall a whole heck of a lot, other than I do remember the event and all the people talking and everything that going on. I can remember, I guess I remember things more after the war started. Some of the things that we used to save, and bacon grease and tinfoil, and a lot of the things that we did during the wartime at that time to try and help out and do things. So that kind of stuff sticks in my mind more than the actual event itself when it occurred. So,
well, I was born in 39, and I remember doing some of that, but do you remember why they saved the grease? Was that used in ammunition?
I don't really know what all they did with it, but I know we could take it to the grocery store, and they had a container that they would put it in, and we took that there, saved tinfoil from gum wrappers and all those kind of things. So.
And did your family have a car?
No, my dad never owned a car. I actually owned a car, or bought a car in 1949, which was, and he still didn't have a car until probably, I don't know, 10 years after then, probably. So,
how did you get back and forth to school?
Well, I walked, and it was funny. I would walk in the wintertime, and in the good weather, we rode the bus or the streetcar. So, but in the bad weather, we always had more fun going to school walking. So,
do you remember where you were living when you were going to Stivers?
Yes, we lived on Wyoming Street at that time. So.
And was there a trolley that went right down Wyoming?
Yes, well, it went downtown and transferred and come back out 5th Street, I think it was, and went right to the high school. So it was not a school bus, it was just a regular public transportation. So we didn't have school buses at that point.
But you were able, a year after you graduated, you were able to buy a car.
I bought a brand new Plymouth car for $1,926, so in 1949. So that was one of the first cars that they started building after the war. So there wasn't too many cars being built at that time. But even though I wasn't making that much money, I was able to save a bunch of it, I remember, and I paid
cash for
car. I paid cash for that car. So,
do you remember who you bought it from?
You know, I don't. Only thing I remember, my mother taught me how to drive. She could drive, although they didn't have a car. And after I got the car, her and I traveled quite a bit. We took a lot of trips. We took a trip out west. We took a trip to Washington, D.C.
Did your mom always drive? You and your mom?
Just her and I,
Dad couldn't drive at all?
No, he could, but he didn't. And the reason he didn't is because he could go wherever he wanted on the railroad for free. So we did all of our vacationing and visiting by getting on the train. So when if we were going to Cincinnati, we took the train from Dayton to Cincinnati. So, and my dad had a brother that lived in Cincinnati, so we would visit them. We could go to Chillicothe on the train, and we did that too. So
you go to Indianapolis on the train.
We went to everywhere. We went out west 2 or 3 times on the train, clear out to California. So
those were really the glory days of railroading, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. So.
Did you always have to go on the B&O, or did you have pass on other rails?
I think he could get on other ones, although we went on the B&O a lot. Of course, B&O finally got taken over by Chesapeake, I think it was. So they took it over after a while. So I remember, the one thing I remember on one of my trips out west, I was, of course, it took several days to get there. It took 3 days to get to Los Angeles, where we were going. And so during the day, I was kind of on my own. I mean, we were on the train. The train was moving, but I could get up and move around. And I would go explore different things, whatever I could get into on the train. And one day, I actually got to the very back of the train and found out that I could go out the back door and stand at the very end of the last car, and you were actually outside. There was a railing around it. You weren't supposed to, but you could do it, so I did. So I went out and was standing there, and I recall the conductor opened the door and grabbed my collar and yanked me back into the train, and he no sooner did that, and we went through a tunnel. And the tunnel, the water came in on both sides to wash the train, and the smoke and stuff was rolling out the back end. I would have really been a mess had I been out there. So
now, was that the caboose? Did they have a caboose?
Well, it was the back car. It wasn't really a caboose, but it was the tail end car, or whatever it was, and you weren't supposed to be out there, but I thought that was a good place to.
Now, when you were riding the train most of the time, did you sleep in the seat, or did you have a compartment?
No, we always had sleepers, so we would sleep. Okay. I generally ended in an upper booth, or upper bunk. But no, we slept on the train.
How was the food on the train?
I enjoyed it. It was always good, I thought. So we used to enjoy eating on the train, and so I don't know. I spent a lot of trips on a train, and that, like I say, that was the main reason my dad never got a car, because he could actually use the railroad any time that he wanted to, and at that time it was going a lot of different places. Today it doesn't go that many different places, but then it did. So.
Well, with your dad working for the railroad, did you ever have an opportunity to get into the locomotive? Let me ask you, was the locomotives mostly steam engines, or were they diesels at that time?
They were into diesels at that time, although there was, like I say, the one trip when I was on the one out west where I was out where I shouldn't have been, that one was a steam engine, because that was why they washed the trains as it goes through the tunnel, and they did that with all of them. But I didn't realize that. But then they had a lot of diesels at that time. So
where was the main yard in Dayton for trains?
You know, I don't really know where the. I mean, we lived there off of Wyoming Street. I'm trying to remember how my dad got to work every day, because he didn't have a car, so it had to be somewhere that he could ride public transportation in order to get there. So,
But
But
at that time, the Dayton train station was down on 6th Street, was it not?
yeah, I think it was. But he didn't work downtown, so he worked out in one of the rail yard areas.
But when you went on trips, you'd have to leave from the downtown station.
Right, yep.
That was still in operation when I was at Dayton. So you worked for B&O about 6 months, and then you opt for another job, and you got a job at NCR.
Got a job at NCR, and I decided I was going to take an apprenticeship. I had decided not to go to college, and I was going to take a apprenticeship. And at that time, you had several choices of apprenticeships with NCR, and I chose one that was called a model maker. And these were individuals who made model parts. Where someone would design a part, we would make the part. The initial part, and they would use that in determining whether or not to go into production on them. So it was kind of like making, somebody would dream up something that they wanted. We would actually get the prints and make the part itself, and that was what the model makers did. I found out that when I went to NCR, you couldn't just start in with an apprenticeship. You had to have been an employee at least 6 months. And it turned out that I was actually employed almost a year before my name came up, and I was eligible to start then as a model making apprentice. So it was a 4-year apprenticeship, and I started that in it was right around 1949, because that's right, I worked almost a year in the factory at NCR before I was actually eligible to start that.
So what did you do in the factory? Did you make?
In the factory, I worked in the factory. I had not a very desirable job, but I was a burr operator. A burr operator is someone who would actually take, it was piecework. You got paid by the piece, but you got paid for putting a drill through a washer, for example, just to open the washers up to a certain diameter. You had to, they would come to you, and you would have a box full of these things. You had to pick them up and hold them up, and this drill was on a foot pedal, and you would actually press on the pedal. The drill would go through the part. So you got paid for however many of those pieces that you could do that with. So it was actually deburring the hole, and also in some cases making it a different size or whatever. So.
Well, for somebody that's going to be watching this years from now, NCR was the initials for the National Cash Register.
Right.
And back at that time, you were making mechanical registers.
Yep.
And from what I've talked to about people around Dayton, that was always referred to as the cash. You worked at the cash.
It was the cash, so, yeah.
When you were working there, how many employees were there? Back in the late 50s, there was as many as 20,000 employees.
Yeah, there was like 25,000 at one time. But when I started, I would guess it was a lot smaller. Of course, this was back in '49, but it was probably, they were a large employer. I would guess there was at least 15,000 people there working, perhaps, when I was working there. So.
What shift did you work when you were working in the factory?
I worked a day shift, so, and
was that 8 hours, 9 hours?
It was 8 hours. I was making 99 cents an hour. I can recall that, and I was married, so living and making 99 cents an hour. So, but I was driving a brand new car and living the life. So.
Well, what was your wife's name?
At that time, it was Joanne.
Joanne?
Joanne. We were married in 1950.
1950. And did she work outside the home?
She was a comptometer operator, if you know what that is. It's like a calculator that people used at that time to I'm not even sure what all they were adding up or whatever. They didn't use that was before computers, so.
Kind of like an adding machine.
Yeah, it was kind of like that, and they used them in banks and a lot of different places, so. But anyway, we were married in 1950. We ended up having 4 children.
Well, let's talk about your children.
Okay.
Who was your first child?
First child was a girl, and we had her when I was in the Marine Corps. One unique part of my service was I was drafted into the United States Marine Corps, and there was not too many people that were drafted into there. It was a volunteer corps, and they reminded us of that every day when we got in there, that it was supposed to be a volunteer corps, but they were having trouble getting enough guys to meet the quotas that they had. The Korean War had started, and so they asked for volunteers when I was drafted, because they wanted 3 people to join the Marine Corps instead of the Army, and there were 75 of us. I thought I had it made. My name was Wilhelm. I'd be way at the bottom of the list. And a lot of guys put their hand up. They wanted to go in the Marines. And the very first name that they mentioned was mine. And,
they started at the back.
They started at the bottom and went up, and found out that instead of getting my basic training in Kentucky, right across the river from Cincinnati, where I thought I would be, I was on a plane, and they flew me to San Diego, California, and I had basic training in San Diego. So.
Well, I've got your induction date here,
Yeah.
April the 10th of '52.
Right, and that was my daughter then was actually born in April the 25th.
So she was born 2 weeks after you were.
Well, a year. The next year.
In '53.
So, yep. So
what's her name?
Her name is Linda.
Linda.
She was born at Balboa Naval Hospital. I kid her all the time because it's right across the street from the San Diego Zoo. So I tell her she was born in the San Diego Zoo. So, but that was when I was when I got into the Marines. I actually had served a year before then, and like I say, if you had less than a year to go, and I had been drafted for 2 years, so I had less than 2 years to go when she was born, and they couldn't move for 2 to 3 weeks, so they weren't allowed to be transported for 2 or 3 weeks. So they kept me there at the station, and then 3 weeks later, I got sent back to Ohio on leave, and from there was transferred to Opelika, Florida. So that's where I ended up. I was lucky. One of the things that it helped me study at that time. The way you finished in your coursework in the Marine Corps was the way you got to decide where your next duty station was. So you could pick your station based on the way you ended up in class. So in my case, I was going to electronics school, and I graduated second in the class. There were 2 openings in Florida, and we grabbed both of those. And we had less than a year to go anyway, so we didn't have to. We were fortunate we didn't get asked to go to Korea.
So tell me again where that was in Florida.
Well, actually, it was in Miami, but it was called Opelika. There was the 3rd Marine Air Wing was located in Opelika, Florida.
Right.
It's all. If you were going to the Keys, you would go through Opelika. So.
And that's Opalaka.
L.A. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. How long was your leave in Florida, in Ohio, before you went to Florida?
I was only there a couple of weeks before, and I went down by myself initially, so my wife and the baby stayed at home. we no sooner got there, and at that time they had a bad hurricane in Puerto Rico, and they sent the Marines down there to assist in clearing the area and helping do some things for the hurricane. So that was how I didn't stay in Florida, but a week or two, and they put us on a Liberty ship, and we ended up down in Puerto Rico and was there for like 3 months. So,
what were your living accommodations in Puerto Rico when you were helping with the cleanup?
we lived in. They had Quonset huts. They had a presence there anyway. They had a base, and it was mostly naval stations, but they had a Marine Air Wing there, and at that time, I had already went to electronics school, and I got attached to a radar group and doing radar repair and things. So we spent several, in addition to helping with clean up the hurricane things, we spent a lot of time in war games where they were actually went through that for a couple of months that we were down there.
So you were down in Puerto Rico about 3 months, you say?
About 3 months, yes.
And then what, back to Opelika?
Came back to Opelika, ended up moving me up to Hialeah, which is a racetrack in Florida, and ended up there. And actually I was there until the time that I got my 2 years in, and that's where I came out of then.
So you were discharged from Hialeah?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What year was that? Was that in?
That should have been 54. Mm-hmm. In April.
What was your rank when you were discharged?
I was actually a corporal.
What promotions had you got and when?
You know, I don't recall when. I remember you go through a 6 weeks basic training. You become a private, first class, and then you become a corporal. I was due to be named as a sergeant when I was ready to leave. They tried very hard to get you to agree that you would like to stay, and I had an opportunity to stay and go to officers training schools, but I was really not interested in the service at that time, so I chose not to do that. So
when you were discharged, how many children did you have? Just the one?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. When you left Opelika or Hialeah, where did you go?
We went to Dayton, and I went back to NCR and finished my apprenticeship. So I went to University of Dayton as part of that apprenticeship for their things, and then went on, continued to work for NCR and completed my degree work at University of Dayton.
So your apprenticeship was 4 years.
Right.
And did you complete your degree with University of Dayton during that 4 years?
At the end of that, yes.
All right. What was your degree in?
Actually, it was in electrical engineering. So I never served a day as a model maker. So I graduated from my apprenticeship as a model maker, and was immediately assigned a job as an electrical engineer. So kind of a weird situation, but a lot of that changed when I went into the service, and I got more interested in electronics at that time, and so that's it. Everything kind of changed as far as the goals that I thought I had, as far as what I wanted to be and do, and it became obvious to me that I wanted to be more involved in the electronics, and so, which
goes to show that life isn't always the way you originally planned.
That's right.
All right.
And although, like you mentioned, although NCR was well known for its cash register, which started out to be kind of a mechanical device and turned into a somewhat of an electrical device. My first job, or my job, became one at NCR of developing the first electronic cash register, which I did. So we developed the first one to be used in grocery stores. So prior to then, they were all the mechanical versions, and these are electronic, and were all run by computer chips and things of that type. So that turned out to be my job, and that's really why I ended up here in Cambridge, because they decided to build that product here in Cambridge, even though it was designed and developed in Dayton. So,
do you remember when you designed that first electronic cash register?
Yep, it was. Actually, that was the reason that I came here. So it was 1974. Actually, I came here in December of 1973. And that was when we started to produce the first electronic cash register here in Cambridge. So,
were you on a team that was developing this?
Yes.
How long did your team work on this before it became a product?
I would guess 6, 7 years anyway. So,
okay. All right.
I worked a long time. Prior to that, as far as things, I worked in an area where we did customizing work on the mechanical registers that we had, and some of that involved electrical changes and things, but a lot of it was mechanical parts as well. So, but I did that for a number of years with NCR before starting on the electronic design.
Well, at one point in time, you were making 99 cents an hour.
Yeah.
When did you start making some money that you could really raise a family on?
I don't know. The thing that I remember, when I actually started, as I said, with NCR in 1948. And I worked for them, other than when I was in the service, all the time from then on. So I moved to Cambridge in 1974, and I didn't retire from NCR until 1993. In all of those years, I held a multitude of different jobs at NCR. And I was told by numerous people later on in life, had I moved each time that I got a different job at NCR to another company or something, I would have probably ended up making 3 times the amount of money that I ended up doing, because I would move within NCR just because there was a need. There was a job opening and they needed someone to do something. And so I moved around an awful lot where there was no increase in pay involved. It was just a different responsibility or a different job they needed done. But if you use that as, if you tried to use that as a way of climbing the work ladder, it would have made a lot of difference. But, I don't know. I guess it's that long of a period of time, the increases occurred on a regular basis. And when you consider 1948 to
93.
Yeah, 1993, when I actually graduated, it didn't take a whole lot each year before he actually started making some decent money. So,
well, I lived here in Dayton for a while, and I remember there was a big hullabaloo about the union coming in. Were you working there when that happened?
Yes, we actually had a strike in Dayton finally. A long time worked there before then, but when I moved here to Cambridge, they actually were having some labor issues. But they had their own union there at NCR, and it was not one of the major union groups. It was
not like the UAW.
no, it was their
like
own,
that.
and it wasn't considered to be that strong of a union. But
Well, tell me about the rest of your children. You've got you've got Linda.
Yeah.
What's the next one?
The next one was Randy, and he.
When was Randy born?
He was born. You know, this. I'm really going to be weak on some of this. I don't even remember.
Well,
he's about 3 years younger than Linda. So I don't know. I would guess Linda was born in '53. He was probably born in '56.
And at that time, you were living in Dayton?
At that time, we lived in Dayton. So.
Where'd the kids go to school? You had gone to Stivers. Where were the kids going to school?
Well, eventually, when the ones that went to high school, at least, were all in Beaver Creek when we moved to Beaver Creek. In Dayton itself, at some of the Dayton schools, the elementary schools, I can't even remember. There was one. Is there a Belmont? I think there was Belmont. A couple of them went to Belmont. Todd, he was the next one to arrive, and he was probably another 2 to 3 years after Randy. And then finally Dawn, she was our Christmas present. And what year was that?
61.
61, so.
Linda and I, 9 years different.
Yeah.
So was she born on Christmas Day?
She was born on Christmas Day. She was our Christmas present, and we lived in Beaver Creek at that time, so.
Okay, is Linda still living?
Yes, all 4 of the kids are.
Is she
2 of them are in Dayton. Linda and Dawn live in Dayton. Randy lives in Plain City, right outside of Columbus. And Todd, he lives in Atlanta, Georgia.
All right, let me ask you about the kids. Is Linda married?
Yes,
What's
she's
her
married.
name?
Her name is Ingalls.
Ingalls, E-N-G-L-E-S?
Yes, she married a boy by the name of Steve Ingle, I-N-G-L-E. And they had 5 children of their own. She has been quite prolific in that we have, she has 5 children, and they have, 17 grandchildren.
17 grandchildren.
Those 5 children do.
A lot of fertility in that line.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of work does Steve or did Steve do?
He was kind of an electronic guy too. So he worked on airplane designs and various things at different times. So.
How about Randy? Randy comes along. He's born in about 56.
And
he went to high school.
Randy went to high school in Dayton.
He go to college?
He started by going to Ohio State. I don't think he even lasted a year, and decided that was not for him, and he became a carpenter. My grandfather was a carpenter, so I always said he took after him, and Randy started his, he I don't know if it was a full apprenticeship type thing, but he worked with someone and was finally he got whatever certifications that he needed, and he did become a carpenter, and he had his own business. So.
What was the name of his business?
Yeah, here.
His business.
What was his business?
I'm trying to think of it now.
Sunrise.
Sunrise Construction. Yes, Sunrise Construction in Columbus, Ohio. So.
Okay.
And he's quite a carpenter, and he's got a a lot of things in this house that he did for us and our families, and he worked both. He's retired now. He retired last year, but he did a lot of inside cabinet work and
Was Randy married?
He is now. He had 2 children, and
What's
they're both. His wife's name is Julie.
Julie? And 2 kids?
They had 2 kids.
All right.
They both. The one of them is still living in Columbus. His name is Joe. He was named after my dad. And his daughter is. She lives in Southport, Michigan, right outside of Detroit now. So both of them just had little babies. So they started kind of late, but they have 2 little. We have 2 grandchildren with them. So
then we've got Todd.
We've got Todd, and he's the one that he worked at NCR. He kind of followed along in my footsteps for a while, but he got an opportunity to work in Cleveland for another company, and he went to work with them. He worked there for a while, but an opening occurred in Atlanta, Georgia for NCR. Todd had worked for NCR briefly before he went to Cleveland, and they convinced him to move to Atlanta. So he moved to Atlanta, and that's where they live, and they have two children as well, so he has 2 daughters.
Well, NCR used to be a major manufacturer in Dayton, and then they got a president, and they moved to Atlanta. Was that part of Todd's move?
Well, he actually moved there right after they moved. Yes, in other words, that when the Cambridge plant closed in the early 1990s, they closed the Cambridge plant, and everything moved to Atlanta. Todd was actually already in Atlanta at that time, so no, he wasn't. No, he didn't move there until after we went there, right? So
did Todd marry?
Yes, he married Anita Sestina, a little young girl from Cambridge. So he got married here in Cambridge.
Do they have children?
And they have 2 daughters.
Then along comes a lady I know, Dawn. She's born in '61.
Yeah, that was Dawn, and she.
You lived in Beaver Creek then?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Where did she go to high school?
She went to high school here in Cambridge, so she went to Cambridge High School.
And what high school?
I actually moved here to Cambridge in 1974.
Yeah.
Actually moved here in December of '73. My wife, Joanne, and I had separated at that time, and we were divorced in 1973. I met Pat in early 1974. It was actually mid to late '74, and we were actually married in '74. We got married in December of '74. I think we met in September, so it was kind of a whirlwind affair. Pat had 2 children, so we kind of ended up like a Brady's bunch. I had my 4 children, she had her 2 children, and we got married, and I made our home here in the Cambridge area, and was.
What was Pat's?
Pat's name was Oakley.
Oakley.
Patricia Oakley.
Okay, Oakley.
Yep. She no relation to Annie, although they. everyone said that she was.
No fame there.
No.
Except being married to you. What was Pat doing when you met her? Was she working?
She was a legal secretary. She worked for one of the lawyers here in town, and had worked for just about all the lawyers, I think, here in town at one time or another. So.
Now, when you say here in town, we're living in Byesville now.
Well, we are now.
We were talking about Cambridge.
We were in Cambridge at that time, yes.
Yep. And did she continue to do that after you got married?
Yes, she did, but not for too long. So we got too busy traveling, and we enjoyed a lot of different areas. A lot of us, we decided to get into the cruising vacation things, and her and I have been on 21 different cruises.
Those ocean cruises or river cruises?
Ocean cruises, all of them. So we've been everywhere and enjoyed all of them, and some probably more than others, but we enjoyed it. We've been to Alaska a few times on a cruise, and mostly in the Caribbean. So.
Well, let me take you back to your childhood during the Second World War, and you talked about saving grease and saving tinfoil. Do you remember rationing sugar and flour and all that kind of stuff?
Yes.
At home?
Yes, I remember.
And how was your home heated? Did you have gas or oil, or what did you have? Coal?
We had coal that I recall. Actually had a stoker, is what I remember. They call it a stoker. You fill this thing full of coal, and it would last for
and you have
quite
a
a few
device
hours.
that would take the coal into the furnace?
Right, take it into the furnace.
Okay. How big
I can
was your
remember
house?
the biggest thing, or the things that I remember the most, I guess, at that time of year was we had an ice man that delivered ice to the house, and a little door open thing that you put a sign up, 25 or 50 or whatever, how much ice you wanted.
A little cardboard sign about 10 by 10, wasn't
and
it?
he would stick that ice in there, and open the door and push it in the hole or the refrigerator, and that was your refrigerator. We used to have the milk delivered on the porch, and I can remember the wintertime going out, and the thing will stick it out that far above the top of the bottle where the cream would freeze. And so a lot of those things that people talk about, I remember doing actually when I was a kid. So.
Yeah. And you had a bread man? Did you have a bread delivery?
Yes, we did.
So you had milk, and you had bread, and you had ice because you had an ice box.
Yeah.
How about your mom and the laundry? Did she have a wringer washer?
She did have, so yeah.
Were you at home when they got their first automatic washer?
You know, I probably was, but I don't remember that. So I remember some of the early black and white TVs, so and a few of those things, and the telephone lines where you could get on and listen to people talk.
Yeah,
and
party lines.
Party lines, and that was the normal thing at that time.
What kind of phone did you have? Did it hang on the wall?
The phone on the wall, yep.
And tell me about your first Plymouth that you bought for $1,946. How long did you keep that?
You know, I had that quite a while. I kept it.
What'd you do with it?
The problem that I had with it was I had it in Florida when I went into the service. So when I went into the service in 1950, I was still driving that Plymouth, and I let it park down at Hialeah. I had a place that they allowed me to park it. But when I came back, it was nothing but rust. It had rusted. The salt water or air had got to it, and I actually took it at that time to Earl Scheib, and for $19.99 got a paint job. So
I remember that. I remember Earl Scheib.
And he paints everything. So there was nothing that wasn't painted at that time, whether they weren't too good about masking off areas that shouldn't have been painted. The whole car got painted.
Even the windows all. So that was in 52.
So that was in 54 when I got back, and I probably got rid of that car then in not too long after that period of time. And I had I can remember I had a Woody, Chevrolet Woody, which was a station wagon, and it was actually had wood on it. In other words, I wish I had that car today, but
yeah, that'd be classic.
yeah, I would have been there. So I went through quite a few cars after that point in time. So
Do you still drive?
yes,
What are you driving now?
today I have a Toyota Sienna. So I've actually I ended up moving to a foreign car. I actually had a Honda before this one, and I purchased this Toyota in 2019, and I don't drive a whole lot now anymore, so I doubt very seriously if I'll be looking to upgrade anything from that, but it's been a good car. So
Well, tell me about your dad. He had born in 1900, and what year did he pass on?
he actually, I was trying to think, we moved here in 1985. He ended up moving here with us because my mom died soon after we moved here. I think my dad died around 1989.
And when you say here, you're talking about the present home in Byesville?
Yes.
And your mom was born in 06, and she died before your dad in 89. Do you remember
Right.
when she died?
You know, I'm thinking it was around 1984 or 5.
Okay.
She died of a heart attack.
How about your dad?
I don't
just kind of wear
recall.
out?
Yeah, actually, I was on a business trip when he died, but he actually had cancer, and I think that was probably, I don't recall if they said that was the actual reason or his death or not, but
So besides yourself, anybody in the family have a college degree? Randy?
no, Randy does
Randy
not.
started at Ohio State.
Yeah, Linda actually was a nurse. She went to nursing school.
Okay.
Todd, he went to, I'm trying to think if he actually went to college. He went to Ohio State, but he didn't get a degree. Yeah. Sam, I had the two children with Pat, is Sam and Bobby. And Sam, he went to Ohio State as well, and he actually graduated from Ohio State.
Okay.
So
Where's he live?
he lives in Pickerington.
That's just outside Columbus.
Right. And he became he actually worked for a company that design work again, but mostly for military. They actually they have construction jobs where they build things for the military. So
All right. Now that's Sam.
that's Sam.
And where's Bobby live?
And Bobby, he lives here in Cambridge, and he works for Detroit Diesel Remanufacturing here in town, where they remanufacture diesel engines and parts for diesel trucks. So it's a big remanufacturing facility.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your military. You got a National Defense Service Medal.
Yeah, I ended up, like I say, working in the electronics area, radar repair. was fortunate, I guess, in my duty stations. I was lucky to be able to, because I went to a lot of different schools when I was in the service, so I really, as I look back at it, I was probably fortunate that I went, because I was able to acquire a lot of things that I wouldn't have been able to had I not done that. So
Well, your DD 214 says you were paid $100 for HOP Z Act. You remember what that was?
and when February 14th,
This was
that was just part of our money
July.
to get home, I think.
okay.
I think they gave us X number of dollars and said, there you are, that gets you back to wherever you were going. So,
Yeah, that was in
because we
April.
drove back home from Florida, I know that. So,
Your paper is signed by Major F.J. Hubka, Hubka. Did you ever serve under him?
no, I don't recall.
Did you have any experiences that were significant when you were down in Puerto Rico helping with the recovery?
You know, not really. I mean, like I say, there was a lot of damage from the hurricane. We did a lot of guard work. I remember just making sure that people didn't come in and vandalize the areas where all the damage was.
Boy, that happens, doesn't
And
it?
not a whole lot. We did a lot of. We had maneuvers down there. There was a little island right off the shore of Puerto Rico called Vieques, and that was a place where the Marines actually used for target practice for bombing runs and things of that nature. So, but nothing really that unusual.
Do you ever go to any reunions with any of the fellows you served with?
You know, the only reunion I've been was to occasionally here in the Cambridge area on the Marine Corps birthday. They'll get together at one of the local restaurants, and I have been to those a couple of times, but not too much. I've often talked about maybe wanting to take one of the
Honor flight?
honor flights. I know a few guys that have done that, and they were quite impressed with it. So, not sure I'll do that, but it's something I've thought about. At least it would be interesting to do that sometime, to
Well, I'll tell
be
you,
able to fly to Washington D.C. and
I would highly recommend that.
Yeah.
I've done dozens and dozens of these interviews, and many guys have been on the honor flight. Everybody comes back and says it's one of the best things I ever did.
Uh-huh.
So I would recommend that to you highly.
Okay.
Now, well, we were talking here on camera. You told me Dawn was born in 61, but then here in the bio form it says she was born in 63. Now, and she stepped away.
yeah. I do good to remember their names, let alone their birthdays. Pat and I together, we actually have 17 grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, they're all married. Not most all of them are married. We have 25 great grandchildren. We try and get together a couple of times a year, Christmas and sometime during the summer. Well, it's to the point where there's too many of us to meet at anyone's house. We can't all, when we're all there, the husbands and all the kids and everyone else, there's like 64 of us. So
You have to rent the hall.
yeah, so we've got to go somewhere where I got enough room for 60-some people just to be able to say we're going to get together. So, but we are able to do that occasionally. So we try and get together at Christmas time, and we're planning a get-together this Father's Day at my son's home in Plain City. He has a kind of a 15, it's a farm, we call it a farm, but he doesn't farm, but he's got 15 acres of ground with a lake, and so he's got plenty of room. We can actually go there and picnic if the weather is right, so we'll probably try and do that this summer. So,
Well, Mary, can you think of anything you'd like to ask Bob?
no, that kind of brings you up to date as to where we were. Like I say, when I actually retired, it was rather strange when NCR was here in Cambridge. We actually were purchased by AT&T at that time, and they decided not to.
His graduation picture started high school.
Yeah.
But they.
Now, we were talking about your birth date on camera. He said you were born in 61. On the bio, it says 63.
61.
61? Okay, we'll correct that on the bio. Is there anything that, you haven't been here all the time we've been talking, but is there anything about your dad that you'd like to talk about, ask about?
Oh, his community service.
Okay. Tell us about your community service.
Well, that's probably the most of what I recall, at least. So, as I indicated, when NCR actually moved from Cambridge, they moved to Atlanta. At that point in time, I was 62 years old when they decided to do that. And although they were very anxious and interested in me moving with them, I fully expected to retire at retirement age at 65, which would have meant that I would have moved to Atlanta for 3 years, and then I would have been coming back anyway because this is the area we wanted to retire in. So I decided to heck with it. I wasn't going to do it. So I just said, nope, this is it. I'll just retire early. So, well, it turned out AT&T had purchased NCR. It didn't work out, but everyone who worked for NCR when that purchase took place was given an extra 5 years of seniority. So it looked like I had been with NCR 5 more years at that particular time. So starting in 48 was when I actually started. That took me back to 1943, actually, is when my service actually showed up as starting. So in 1993 is when I actually, well, what happened was when I told them I wasn't going to move to Atlanta, they asked me to stay here and close the plant and close it down, which I did. Then they decided to close the Dayton facility down. They sent me to Dayton, and I closed that plant. And I became the Grim Reaper. Then no one wanted to see me show up because when I showed up, that meant they were selling the plant.
You got that right.
And I went to a couple of other locations to assist with it, but I didn't end up having to close them down. But anyway, I thought I was done, and that was in. That was in that I would be done working, and then, well, I was off. I think I closed the Dayton plant in December or January. 5 months later, they contacted me and asked me to work in Atlanta on a contract. I ended up working for 8 years more in Atlanta.
In Atlanta,
and Pat and I would fly back and forth to Atlanta every 2 to 3 weeks between Cambridge and Byesville and back to Atlanta, because we kept our home here, but we actually were living in apartments and things down there. So I did that for an additional 8 years. So
were you an actual employee or you were just a contractor?
I was a contractor. I wasn't an employee. So when when we got up, when the day that 9/11 occurred, I was at NCR working. Pat was at home. We had been in Atlanta a couple of weeks by then anyway. Anyway, 9/11 occurred. Pat and I talked when we got home that night, and we decided that's it. We're done. We got NCR to ship everything we had back to here, so we didn't have to take anything. But we got the first flight out of Atlanta and flew back to Columbus. So that was the week after 9/11. So I never went back to Atlanta after then. That was the end of it. So
For somebody that's watching this down the road, 9/11, explain that on camera what 9/11 was.
that was the day the Twin Towers in New York were hit by the airplanes and dropped both of them. It was kind of unique in that when I came back to Cambridge, I had already started to get involved in the Salvation Army here in Cambridge, and I was the secretary treasurer of the local Salvation Army. When I got back, the captain at the Salvation Army called me one day that following week after I got back and said, "Hey, I've been contacted. They need help in New York. They would like a group of us to go there and assist in the cleanup area for 9/11. Would you be interested in going?" And I was naturally interested in going, so I ended up, and we went to New York. I spent about 10 days with the Salvation Army. We served food to the people who helped. They were still on the searches where they were searching for bodies and whatever, and the area, it was kind of an outside area. They had surgical tents set up and things where they would actually, if they found something, that they could actually do various things there. But anyway, I was very involved with the Salvation Army at that time. That was kind of quite a memorable event, and I got involved in that when I came back.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
You were over there about 10 days.
Yes.
Where did you stay?
We actually stayed. We stayed in a camp area, a Salvation Army camp area that was used in the summertime as a camp. They opened it back up so we could sleep there, and then we would drive from there during the day. And we was at the park area where they were all the self-responder guys were actually coming to that area. The firemen and the police and the surgical teams and whatever, all the rescue items. We had food carts and things set up in that area, and then we served them meals.
So you were living in tents?
So we actually lived. No, but they weren't tents. They were like, it was like a summer camp. It was
little
like
cabins?
yeah. So we actually had twin beds or cots or whatever it was that we stayed on at night. So it was probably a half-hour drive or so from where we actually worked during the day. So then I ended up at a warehouse there. They had a prison where they had the prisoners were they let them go to this warehouse, and they worked in that warehouse putting stuff together and of all the things that were being donated. I mean, there was everything. Everything was coming in from all over the country, and it came into that warehouse, and these prisoners actually were cataloging it and moving, storing it, putting it on racks and putting it in areas where they could be disposed of. When people needed them, you could come in if you needed, depending on what it was. If it was clothing, you went to this area. If it was food items or water, you went somewhere else. And then we fed those prisoners while they were doing all that work. So,
what did those prisoners require? Security guards?
They had them, but everybody. it was just like working with anyone else that you worked with. It didn't sound. I mean, we knew they were prisoners, but really you didn't know that if you weren't real involved with it. So, but yes, they had guards and stuff. But
everybody really chipped in.
Yeah, they stepped up to it. And
I don't know if Mary can zoom in on that when Bob was in high school with Stivers. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right.
Now, Dad, didn't you head up some prayer groups as well when you were there?
Yeah, well, actually, we were. People were coming in at that time looking for, they'd lost family members, friends, and things. So there were areas where they could come in, and we tried to provide whatever help we could to them and assist them. And there were walls of areas where pictures and things were being posted, and
people could look for survivors.
Yeah, they were looking for family members and friends that were missing as a result of that.
So have you stayed active with the Salvation Army?
Yeah, I actually, once that was over, the captain and I talked about a need that we thought existed in the area, and we started a summer sack lunch program in Cambridge. What we did was, for the 10 weeks that the kids were out of school, we got volunteers to come to the local Salvation Army and make up sack lunches for them for noonday lunches during the whole summer period, since there was no school cafeteria that they could go to. And we started that. It quickly turned into a very popular thing, and we were serving 20,000 lunches per summer. So we went from no program at all like that to where over the period of time we've probably been involved in serving close to 400,000 summer sack lunches to kids in the Cambridge-Byesville area. So,
and all that food's been donated.
And the food was mostly all donated, but we would meet in the mornings and we would prepare. We cooked hot dogs. We made bologna sandwiches sometimes. It was a different sandwich every day. A lot of the other things, the chips and the cookies and a lot of those things were donated. And we had a company that made the drinks in a box. You've probably seen them in a grocery store. Kids would drink those. They actually produced them here in the Cambridge area. They donated all those that we needed during the summer. So they'd donate 20,000 of those drinks, and each lunch would have a drink in it. Each lunch would generally have a piece of fruit, an apple, an orange, a banana, or something. So it was kind of a well-rounded meal, and that program is still going on today, although it, like many others, took a big hit at COVID, and COVID kind of put a stop to a lot of that. It is just now starting to build back up again. I think last summer we did maybe 6,000 lunches, so it's a lot less than what it was at the time when we got involved in it. But so that was one area that I got involved with Salvation Army. We had a program called Share and Care, where we do the same thing with individuals that live in this county that require assistance or aid, whether it was if they were going to get their electric shut off or their water, they needed medicine, depends on what they needed. So those people were going from church to church to church looking for somebody to give them a handout. The churches were overwhelmed with that activity, so we formed this group in the Salvation Army called Share and Care. When these people would show up at the church, They referred them to the Salvation Army. They came there. We would provide whatever assistance we could and then notify the church that this is what we did for them and whatever. But it was a big help to them because it got what they would end up doing then is they actually made donations, financial donations to the Salvation Army to allow us to continue that type of help. So, and they didn't have the resources that we had to go in and make sure the need that they were expressing was real. What they were going to do, you found out right in the beginning. You can't just hand them the money, because if you do, they didn't get whatever help they said they needed. So we had to have all kind of arrangements with people at the motels that we put them up in, or the groceries that they were allowed to go to, what they could do with the what they could purchase and what they couldn't purchase. So,
are Byesville and Cambridge in the same county?
Yes.
What county is
Guernsey County.
Is Guernsey County a particularly poverty-stricken county?
Well, it's lower income. It's kind of in the Appalachia area, so it's considered a lower income area. So, but I went from getting involved in that to where then I was asked to help out with the United Way, because the United Way, although the Salvation Army was part of the United Way, there was a lot of other organizations providing other kinds of help. So I ended up kind of moving into that area as well, and ended up being the president of the United Way for several years, and actually ended up being a trainer for all the what we called them were loaned executives. We would go to the various businesses in town and get them to identify people that their employees that were willing to spend a few hours a month working through the United Way to provide help to the people within Guernsey County that needed that kind of help. So went into that end of the community service, and of course there you get all areas of help that were required. Like I say, it's a lot more than just what the Salvation Army was involved in. So and that led me into getting involved with ARP, and I had always liked working with numbers and things. So I found out that ARP provided a service where they would do taxes for senior citizens and lower income people. So I ended up deciding I would give that a try. I actually did it for a couple of years, and the next thing I knew, I was the district coordinator, and I had this entire area of southern Ohio. So I ended up with 7 different sites. So I was at a different place every day doing taxes, whether it was in Coshocton and Newcomerstown and Zanesville, Cambridge, Senecaville. So all those areas were in my district, and I had to find the volunteers to do that and work through ARP. I ended up, fortunately, I got what they call an Andrus Award, which is a pretty prestigious award through ARP. It's based on volunteer work that people do occasionally, and that was the lady's name that it was involved with. But anyway, they had quite a thing going on here. So, so
in a nutshell, you've been busier doing volunteer things than you ever were with the Marines.
That's right. So,
and
I've enjoyed every one of them. So.
And the Ohio Senate, if Mary can focus in on this, the Ohio Senate recognized you.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that all came out through the...
And then you've got the Ohio Veteran. Pardon?
Higher. Lovely.
got the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame that you've been entered into.
That's quite a prestigious organization as well. So
Absolutely.
a lot of different past presidents, and John Glenn, and a lot of individuals that have been awarded that. So
That was your that was your emblem for that, and here's the document for that. And then on top of that, Mayor of Cambridge has given you a proclamation in the year 2018.
All his other awards are down hanging on the wall.
So you
Call it the Hall of Fame.
you really have been outstanding.
Yeah.
So thank you for your service.
quite all right.
Thank you for this interview.
Thank
Don,
you.
did this bring anything to mind? Or Pat, is there anything you want him to talk about?
He'll talk about what he wants to.
Mary?
No.
All right. Well, we'll bring that to a close. We've been here for a good while.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, Patrick.